Τώρα θέλω να σας συστήσω τον γιατρό τον Γιώργο Καναράκη, Dr. George Kanaraki, who has the Medal of the Order of Australia. He's an adjunct professor at Charles Sturt University. He's published extensively on linguistics, literature, historiography, and press of the diaspora Greek, especially of Australia and New Zealand. He's well published and widely published, including Greek Voices in Australia, which book is here, held up by Mr. Canada. And also the latest book, which is the Diachronic Contribution of Greek on Other Languages of the World, published in Athens in 2014. George Kanaraki, thank you.
First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Hiel Marcelo and the members of the organizing committee for their kind invitation to participate in this International Symposium of Citizen. It is an honor for me to be considered a philologist. It's already well documented, even among non-Cyprians, that the Cyprian presence in Australia is not only age-old, but it is also dynamic and multifaceted. As the Cyprians have made their mark in many areas of life, the arts, business, the sciences, medicine, philanthropy, both in Australia and on their homeland. The advent of the 20th century saw Cyprian immigrants not only in New South Wales, but also in all the other states of Australia. In his memorable work, under the title Southern Europeans in Australia, Charles Price notes that in the period 1890 to 1940, the Cyprians constituted the large immigrant group of male settlers in Australia, mainly in Sydney and New South Wales in general. That is 2,200 persons, or 4.6%, followed by the Castellorisians, 1,290, or 2.7%, and the Ithacans, 860, or 1.8%. Consequently, we are not surprised that today the largest concentration of Cyprians is located in the Sydney region, while that of Ithacans is in Melbourne, and of Castellorisians is in Perth of Western Australia. Beyond the fields already mentioned, and despite the daily hardships confronting in the new homeland, Cyprian immigrants have also ventured successfully into the field of literature. And literature is an area which is usually overlooked, unfortunately. The traditional interest and skill in literary expression which they brought with them into the new environment, unfortunately has not been sufficiently researched and acknowledged. Consequently, my presentation today, flowing on from my research into the literary activities of the Greeks in Australia in general, and the Cyprians in particular, I believe will shed light on this important aspect of the Cyprian presence in Australia. Furthermore, it enables me to say confidently that the Cyprians, when compared to the other Greek immigrant groups, have not fallen short in this intellectual field. The earliest phrases of literary expression by Cyprians, which I have located, go back to the beginning of the second decade of the 20th century. They were primarily rhyming, poetic improvisations, inspired by the stimulus of the moment, an event or a celebration. Within a few years, however, Cyprian literary creation was not limited to poetry, but moved on to various other genres, including short story writing, essays, plays, literary translation, sometimes in both languages, Greek and English. Two relevant examples of such expanded activity are Anargyros or Andrew Patser from the village of Potamos, and James Galanis, born in Sydney, but raised in the village of Aroniadica, where his father had returned with his family just a few months before the outbreak of World War I. Coincidentally, Patser and Galanis both left for Australia in 1924, and both were young teenagers. Furthermore, it is interesting that the formal education of both men consisted of primary school and the 3-year components of secondary education, scholar year in detail. Patser's first literary efforts appeared when he was 20, in 1927, with Greek language poems published in the Sydney Greek newspaper Panellinios Kids, that was the title. And later, in 1936, with his first English language poem in the noted Australian newspaper, the Sydney Morning Herald. Must be mentioned that Patser's knowledge of English was negligible when he first arrived in Australia. But in a few years, due to his persistence and study, as well as his marriage to an Australian woman, he managed to master the language to such a high level of competency that he could write letters and articles for Australian newspapers in Sydney. The amazing progress Patser was making is reflected by the fact that in 1944, the Education Division of the Australian Army appointed him as a teacher of English at the Ascot military base in Sydney for the Greeks who were serving in the army. And also that in 1954-1980, he worked as an official interpreter and translator for Greek at the New South Wales Force, while from 1955 he taught English by correspondence to new immigrants in the New South Wales Department of Education. His really productive literary activities in both languages, however, flourished from the 1940s onwards, not only in quantity over the years, but also in variety of literary genres. He published in both languages, apart from poetry, short stories, plays, literary essays, feature articles, book reviews, and theatre reviews in both Greek and Australian newspapers and magazines. Patser was participated in poetry and prose competitions and was awarded private and honorary mentions. In playwriting, he wrote 2 works, one in Greek, Tonia Mandouri, which appeared in serialized form in the journal Ikougenia of Melbourne, and one in English, The Foreign Boy, in two versions, one of which was scripted for ABC television in 1958, and the second for the for the theatre, 1971, but both have remained unpublished. In his play, Patser focuses on Greek immigrant life in Australia. In his Greek language play, he finds the opportunity to stigmatize Greek social customs, such as matchmaking and the dowry. He enjoyed more success, however, with his poetic and prose texts. Thematically, he concentrated passionately on 3 topics: patriotism, nostalgic love for his native island, and life in the foreign land dominated by the struggle for survival. On the other hand, one of the most significant and comparatively prolific literary writers in those early years of writing by Greeks in Australia is James Galanis. Galanis wrote in both languages, despite the fact that his formal education in English was limited. Most of his surviving works are in English, although he also wrote in Greek. Galanis' literary career began in 1941, in his early 30s, when he was a soldier in New Guinea. There, he started a literary journal entitled Army with the Australian writer Thomas Hardy. An outgoing man with a warm and engaging personality, Galanis made friends easily. In New Guinea, his friendship with Thomas Hardy, with whom he organized an Army Writers Club, played an essential role in his literary activity, at least during the first year. At that time, he also wrote a collection of short stories in English, north of the Attenborough line, which had remained unpublished. Galanis was essentially a prose writer. His talent expanded to short story writing, travelogues, critiques, essays, translations of poems and prose works, as well as to articles on the social problems of the Greeks in Australia and the political situations in Greece. It is also worth noting that the Australian city of Newcastle, together